The cold crept in before I even opened my eyes. The kind of deep, bone-settled cold that doesn't belong to a hangover alone. My temples throbbed in that specific way. That means you had one glass after you should have stopped, then kept going anyway. And the sheets against my arms felt nothing like the worn cotton set I'd had since graduate school. Too smooth, too heavy, the kind of thread count that has its own name. I kept my eyes shut for another few seconds, trying to piece together the night from whatever fragments the champagne had left behind. The Architecture Foundation Gala. My firm's table near the front, close enough to see the projection screen, when they announced my name for the Emerging Design Award. The first time anything with my name on it had ever been projected 12 feet tall. Zoe screaming beside me, nearly spilling her drink. The open bar afterward, the toasts, the way the celebration had felt so clean and earned right up until Spsner walked in with his new girlfriend on his arm. My stomach turned. I forced my eyes open. The ceiling above me was not my ceiling. Mine had a water stain shaped like a mitten in the upper left corner. A quirk of my Wicker Park condo I'd stopped noticing years ago. This ceiling was white plaster with recessed lighting, and through the floor-to-ceiling windows across the room, Chicago's skyline glittered against a February sky still dark with pre-dawn cold. I was at least 30 floors up. The room itself was precise in the way that very expensive things tend to be. Nothing unnecessary, nothing cheap, every surface chosen on purpose. A painting on the far wall that I recognized, not because I knew the artist personally, but because I'd seen it in an auction catalog my firm had received as a favor. 6 figures, minimum. This was not a hotel. I turned my head slowly, braced, and found the answer to the question I hadn't wanted to ask. He was asleep on the other side of the bed, one arm folded beneath his head, shoulders rising and falling with the steadiness of someone who had nothing to be afraid of. His face, relaxed in sleep, was the kind of handsome that registers as a warning before it registers as anything else. Sharp jaw, dark lashes, a scar along the left side of his chin that hadn't come from something polite. I recognized him the same way I recognized that painting, from a distance with a certain wariness. Mateo Reyes, real estate. Philanthropy, technically, though the word sat wrong in every context I'd heard it used. Ran more of Chicago's riverfront development than any single private entity had a right to, and the Reyes name appeared in building dedications on the north side, the way other family names appeared on hospital wings, everywhere and quietly insisting. What the architecture world whispered about, and what everyone who moved in certain circles knew without ever saying directly, was what else the Reyes family moved. No one had ever proven anything. No one seemed particularly eager to try. I was in his bed, in his penthouse, wearing a silk sleep shirt that definitely was not mine. My hands went to my throat, my necklace, a small gold bar my mother had given me, still there. Some instinct making sure. Then I started moving toward the edge of the mattress, millimeter by millimeter, the way you approach a door you're not sure is locked. There's coffee if you want it. His voice was unhurried, a little rough with sleep, and it stopped me cold. Black, or there's cream on the counter. I didn't turn around. I need to go home. You could. The mattress shifted as he sat up. Though I'm not sure what you're planning to tell your firm about missing the morning briefing you have in 4 hours. That made me turn. How do you know about my... You mentioned it. He reached for his phone on the nightstand, the movement easy, unbothered. Twice. Very enthusiastically. Something about load-bearing calculations for the River North project. He looked completely at ease, sitting up in bed in the gray light of a Chicago winter morning, like this situation. A confused woman trying to calculate her exit was entirely unremarkable. He held his phone out toward me. I didn't take it. What is that? Proof. He said it the way people say things when they're already sure of the outcome, of last night. I took the phone. The video was security footage. Timestamp, 2:51 a.m. The lobby of what I recognized after a moment as Cook County Civil Courthouse. I'd been there twice for permit hearings, knew the marble floor and the clerk's window on the right. The woman on the screen was wearing my dress, the slate blue one I'd bought for the gala, and she was leaning on the counter with the specific deliberateness of someone trying very hard to appear sober. The man beside her had one hand at the small of her back, keeping her upright. I watched myself sign something, then turn and kiss him in a way that made a passing security guard look pointedly at the ceiling. I stopped. Started again. I would never. You were very decisive about it. He took the phone back without urgency. Your friend tried to intervene. Zoe, the name came out before I could stop it. She made a good argument. You told her this was the first genuinely impulsive thing you'd done since you were 19, and that it was statistically overdue. A pause. Something that might have been amusement in his voice as though it was contained. I thought that was fair. I found my phone on the nightstand. Apparently someone had plugged it in overnight. 4 texts from Zoe, the last one from 3:47 a.m. I tried. You were very sure. I'm so sorry and also kind of impressed. Call me the second you read this. I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed my palms flat against my thighs. The marble floor was cold against my bare feet. This can be annulled. I wasn't in a state to. Probably. He stood, crossed to the window, hands loose at his sides as he looked out over the city. Though there were 3 witnesses who would describe you as enthusiastic rather than incapacitated, the judge included. Why did you agree to it? I demanded. Men like you don't. You have lawyers. You have arrangements. You don't marry strangers because they have too much champagne and a terrible night. He turned around. His expression was difficult to read in the morning light. Not unfriendly, not warm, somewhere in the deliberate middle space of a person who has learned to keep their cards very close. What makes you think, he said, that last night was the first time I noticed you, Miss Quinn? The words landed wrong in a way I couldn't name yet. I filed them away for later being when I was out of this penthouse and could think in a straight line. I need to go home. I need my dog. Your dog is here. I stared at him. Zoe gave the doorman at your building his leash code around 4 a.m. He's in the guest room, asleep on what I'm told is a very expensive chair. Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but adjacent to one. He snores. Biscuit. My rescue greyhound, 70 pounds of anxiety and opinions. Currently asleep on a probably ruined chair in the penthouse of a man whose family had fingers in half the city's underworld. Something in my chest went sideways at the knowledge that he'd thought of it, that someone had. This still doesn't, I started. Sit down. He moved to the kitchen, opened a cabinet with the ease of someone who has never had to search for anything. I'll explain what I can, and then you can decide what you want to do about it. The coffee he put in front of me was perfect. I hated that. His name, he explained, the real one, the one that mattered underneath the Foundation galas and the Architectural Digest features, was Reyes. And Spencer Walsh, my ex-boyfriend of 14 months since, the corporate attorney with the terrible taste in ties and the very nice apartment in Lincoln Park, had been doing something with it. He was running money, Mateo said, his voice flat as a legal brief, through 3 of our development LLCs. Small amounts, layered, the kind of thing that takes 18 months to notice in an audit, unless you know exactly where to look. He turned his coffee cup once on the counter. We noticed. Spencer disappeared 6 weeks ago before we could have a conversation about it. He took something with him. Digital access to offshore accounts that don't belong to him. I set my cup down carefully. Spencer was laundering money. For the Marchetti family, he said it the way you say a neighborhood name, matter of fact, specific, old money, old grudges. They've been in Chicago longer than my family, and they do not like losing track of their assets. And they think I know where he is. They know he came to the gala last night. His jaw tightened, barely. They've been watching him, waiting for him to surface. When he left with his date, they followed the wrong person. You. When they realized he was gone and you were still inside, they assumed the logical thing, that you and Spencer were still in contact, that he would eventually come to you. My condo, the thought arrived cold, have they? Broken in, yes. He slid his phone across the counter. The photo showed my living room, or what was left of it. Couch cushions slashed, bookshelves swept, my drafting table upended, every drawer pulled. Around 5 this morning, your neighbor in 4B called it in, the police have a report. He paused. Biscuit wasn't there, he's safe. I looked at the photo of my ruined apartment for a long moment. My sketches, 4 years of project drawings and folders in that drafting table, all of it gone through. I don't know where Spencer is, I said quietly. I haven't spoken to him since October. I believe you. He said it without hesitation, which surprised me more than the photo had. But the Marchettis won't, not without evidence, and Spencer built in a complication that ensures they'll keep looking. He opened a folder on the counter. Legal documents, dense with language I could mostly parse. I'd reviewed enough construction contracts to know the shape of an LLC filing. My name appeared in the 3rd paragraph of the top page, then again in the signatory block at the bottom. I had never seen this document before in my life. Shell company, Matteo said. He registered you as co-trustee 3 months before he disappeared. Forged, almost certainly, but the biometric verification tied to the account is real. He pulled your data from your firm's security clearance system. He handled your firm's legal work for 2 years. I understood then, the cold clarity of it, settling like a concrete pour. I'm the key. The accounts require 2-factor authorization, his credentials, and a biometric match from the co-trustee. He looked at me steadily. Which is you? So whoever finds me first gets everything. He closed the folder. Which is why going home isn't an option right now, Ms. Quinn. Your apartment has been searched. Your name is attached to roughly $4 million in hidden assets, and the Marchetti family has people watching every entrance to your building. I pressed the back of my wrist against my mouth and thought about the load-bearing calculations waiting on my desk at work. The structural review for the River North site. The entirely normal Tuesday I was supposed to be having. You married me, I said slowly, to protect me. Last night, you knew when I signed the papers that this would happen. I knew the Marchetti family had eyes on the gala. He picked up his coffee again. I didn't plan the rest of it. But you didn't stop it. He was quiet for a moment. No. Why? He looked at me across the counter, and for just a second, something moved behind the careful, controlled expression. Something that wasn't calculation. Because you were dancing, he said finally, and I couldn't think of a single reason not to. I spent the next 4 days learning the shape of a gilded cage. Matteo's penthouse was 3,000 square feet of precisely chosen furniture and genuinely good art, and it drove me insane within 36 hours. Biscuit adapted faster than I did. By day 2, he had claimed the leather sectional and was being fed shredded rotisserie chicken by someone named Hector, who appeared and disappeared from the kitchen without making any sound. On the morning of day 3, I found a set of architectural markers and a roll of drafting paper on the dining table. No note. Just the supplies, and beside them, a printout of the River North project specs with a sticky note. Didn't think you'd survive another day without something to do. I sat down and started sketching. Matteo found me there 2 hours later. He pulled out the chair across from me without asking and looked at the drawing. That's wrong, he said, pointing to the northeastern support column. The load distribution from the mezzanine addition puts too much stress there. We flagged it in our engineering review 6 months ago. I looked up at him. You know this building. I own this building. He said it the same way he said everything, like information, not performance, or the LLC that holds the development rights does. Which is part of why Spencer's meddling is a problem. I looked back at the drawing, looked at where he'd pointed. Then I pulled the project spec sheet toward me and started cross-referencing, following the thread. The Marchetti family had been trying to acquire the River North site for 2 years. Rejected. Spencer had access to Ray's development files through the legal work. Spencer was running money for the Marchettis. He was feeding them information, I said slowly. About your projects. About the structural reviews, the financing structure, the building timeline. We believe so. Then the offshore accounts don't just hold money. I looked up. They hold documentation, proof of what he was passing to them and when. I tapped the column on my sketch. That's leverage, not just cash. If the Marchettis get those files, they don't just get Spencer's stolen millions. They get grounds to challenge your permits, your development contracts, potentially your entire River North stake. Matteo was watching me with an expression I hadn't seen on him before. Focused, but differently. Like he was recalibrating something. You got there faster than my attorney did, he said. Your attorney probably wasn't looking at the building while he thought about it. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, approaching one. Celeste Reyes arrived the next morning in a charcoal cashmere coat, and the kind of composure that comes from having made hard decisions for so long that nothing rattles you anymore. She assessed me the way engineers assess a load-bearing wall, looking for where the weakness is. She didn't waste time. The Marchetti family has made a formal request, she said, folding her hands on the dining table. They want you handed over for questioning. Voluntarily, they call it. Voluntarily, I repeated. They're always so polite before they stop being polite. She glanced at her son. Mateo has refused, which means we're now in active conflict with a family we've coexisted with for 4 decades. You understand what that costs. I understand you're telling me I'm the reason people might get hurt. You're the reason the situation is complicated. She tilted her head. The reason people might get hurt is Spencer Walsh, who made choices that involved you without your knowledge. I find it useful to be precise about those distinctions. I hadn't expected that. I sat with it for a moment. There's a way to end this cleanly, Celeste continued. Spencer has to surface. When he does, the accounts can be unlocked, the documentation recovered, and the Marchettis lose their leverage. Without those files, they have no proof of what they were doing with Reyes projects. They go back to tolerating our existence. She stood, smoothed her coat. You should know that your marriage, accidental as it was, has complicated their calculations considerably. An offense against a Reyes wife is a different matter than an offense against a stranger. She looked at me, and something in her expression shifted. Not softness exactly, but honesty. My son doesn't make impulsive choices. In 36 years, I have watched him consider every decision from 6 angles before committing to it. A pause. That is why last Tuesday night was interesting to me. After she left, I stood at the window for a long time, watching the Chicago River frozen gray below. She likes you, Mateo said behind me. She didn't say that. No, he came to stand beside me, not close, just near. She said you were interesting. For her, it's the same thing. Spencer surfaced on a Thursday. Not dramatically. Not a phone call, not a ransom note. Mateo's people found him at a long-term rental in Evanston, 2 miles from the Northwestern campus, paying cash under a name that had been a college roommate's. He looked exhausted when they brought him to the Penthouse, thinner, with the hollow eyes of someone who'd been running too long. When he saw me standing in Mateo's living room, he had the grace to look ashamed. Kara, he started. Don't, I held up one hand. Just tell me what you need from me so this ends. The account access required both his credentials and my biometric verification. Fingerprint and retinal scan. Mateo's tech people had set up the terminal, and Spencer worked through the authentication sequence with the defeated efficiency of someone past the point of resistance. I placed my hand on the reader, held still for the scan, watched the screen populate, with account structures and documentation files that represented 14 months of careful, catastrophic betrayal. The Marchetti documentation went to Mateo's attorney. The offshore funds moved through channels I didn't ask about and didn't need to understand. Within 4 hours of Spencer sitting down at that terminal, the Marchetti family sent word through an intermediary that their interest in my whereabouts had been resolved. Spencer looked at me before Mateo's people walked him out. I know you won't believe this. You're right, I said. I won't. He left. I sat down on the couch next to Biscuit and pressed my face into his narrow graying fur and breathed until my hands stopped shaking. Mateo sat down on the other end of the couch. He didn't say anything, didn't try to fill the silence. Just sat there while I worked through it, Biscuit stretched across both our laps, like he'd decided this configuration was permanent. You can go home, Mateo said eventually. I'll have my people sweep your building first. The damage to your unit is already being repaired. I looked up at him. By who? Contractor, I trust, a beat. Your drafting table is fine. I had them prioritize it. Of course you did. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. You're very organized for someone who married a stranger on a weeknight. You weren't a stranger. I was, mostly. He looked at me for a long moment. Biscuit huffed in his sleep, redistributing his weight across us both, deeply unconcerned with the tension in the room. "I've watched you work on those specs for 4 days," Matteo said. "I know you take your coffee with 1 sugar in the morning and nothing in the afternoon. I know you don't sleep past 6 even when you're exhausted. I know the first thing you do when something's wrong is find a problem you can actually solve, and work it until it isn't a problem anymore." He paused. "That's not a stranger. You've known me for a week. 7 days, 14 hours. I stared at him. "Did you actually count that?" "I'm precise." A pause, "It's a character flaw." I laughed, a real one, startled out of me, and the tension in the room broke open into something else entirely. Biscuit lifted his head, looked between us with the philosophical resignation of a dog who has accepted that humans are confusing, and put it back down. "The marriage can be annulled," Matteo said. "The circumstances support it. I would not hold you to something you didn't choose with full information." "What if I wanted to choose it?" I said. "With full information." The silence that followed was different from all the other silences. He looked at me the way he'd looked at the River North spec. Careful, thorough, looking for the flaw. Not finding it. "You'd be choosing a complicated life," he said. "I'm a structural architect." I held his gaze. "I've spent 10 years figuring out how to make complicated things stand up." He reached across Biscuit very slowly, telegraphing every inch of it, and took my hand, turned it palm up in his, looked at it like it was something he needed to memorize. "Cara mia," he said quietly, and because my name is Cara, and because he knew that, it landed somewhere between a statement and a claim. Just personal enough to mean everything. "I need you to be sure." "I'm sure about you." I curled my fingers around his. "I'm sure about the man who told me I was wrong about the load-bearing column before he told me anything else. I'm sure about the fact that you saved my dog before I even thought to ask. I'm sure about whoever decided to leave drafting paper on the table because they knew I'd go insane without something to solve." I looked up at him. "Everything else we figure out." He brought my hand to his mouth, pressed his lips to my knuckles. Not choreography, not performance. Just quiet and real and deliberate. Outside, Chicago was still frozen. The river below the window, the skyline past it, the whole city in its February gray. From up here it looked like something I could build. Biscuit snored. Matteo looked at me over our joined hands, and for the first time since I'd woken up in this penthouse with a stranger's ceiling above me, and everything I thought I knew overturned, the feeling in my chest was not panic. It was something that felt a lot like foundation.